Clara Hoffman looked down at her feet and saw death in miniature. The toes wouldn't close. They splayed outward like talons of a dead bird, frozen in a position human bones shouldn't achieve. 6 months of rationed bread and watered soup had done that. 900 calories daily when her body needed 2,000 just to maintain heartbeat, lung function, consciousness. But the concrete floor beneath those ruined feet would do something far worse. She just didn't know it yet. December 28, 1944, 2:30 p.m. Rhine Temporary POW Camp, a concrete warehouse that had stored munitions before it stored people. Temperature inside, 2 degrees Celsius. Temperature of the floor itself, -2. The warehouse held 247 women, all standing. Clara was 35 years old, 5 feet 5 inches, 98 pounds. Body mass index, 16.3. Starvation threshold, 16. She was a nurse, German Army trained, 1939 to 1943. Her hands knew frostbite assessment by color. Pink meant viable, grey meant danger, black meant amputation. Her eyes could recognize hypothermia before patients felt it. Her training had been thorough, methodical, the kind that didn't distinguish between friend and enemy when preserving tissue and preventing gangrene. But nothing had prepared her for this. The locket around her neck held 2 photographs. Hannah, 8 years old, Fritz, 5, last seen December 25th, 72 hours ago. Separated at a checkpoint, children sent east toward relatives, mothers sent west toward capture. The soldier doing the separating hadn't been cruel or kind, just following orders in a war where orders were the only thing holding chaos at bay. Around her stood 3 women who would become her anchors. Annalise Weber, 19, 4'11", 87 pounds, factory worker from Dusseldorf. Both parents dead, father to bombing, mother to typhus. Feet wrapped in tablecloth strips, no socks, wooden clogs instead of boots. She hadn't complained once during the 2-day journey here. Margaret Adler, 26, 5'7", 119 pounds. Former track athlete, 800-meter regional champion, 1938. Broad shoulders, long legs, the build of someone whose muscle memory still recalled strength. During the march, she'd carried 3 other women's packs without being asked, rotating every hour so no one collapsed. Liesel Müller, 22, 5'4", 93 pounds, office clerk from Mainz. She spoke some English, not fluent but functional. During transport, she'd overheard guards mention Ward C and feet, and medical terminology she couldn't follow. 3 American soldiers managed the facility. Captain Leonidas Whitmore, 42. Virginia accent thick enough that English speakers sometimes needed repetition. Clean but worn uniform. Face showing pure professional focus. The kind developed when you've made decisions that cost lives and learned to sleep afterward, because the alternative was madness. Sergeant Thaddeus Brennan, 28. Minnesota farm country in every line of his posture. When his eyes met Clara's during head count, she saw discomfort. Not hatred, not indifference, just the uncomfortable awareness of watching suffering he couldn't prevent. Dr. Silas Morrison, 34. Pennsylvania accent. Medical bag that looked like it had seen every European theater horror. When he reached Clara during initial assessment, he paused. Height? He asked in German. 5'5", Clara replied in English. Morrison's eyebrows rose. Weight? 98 pounds. 6 months at 900 to 1,200 calories daily. BMI 16.3. I can calculate it for you, but I suspect you already have. Morrison studied her. Really studied. Your medical? Was. Nurse. German Army. 1939 to 1943. Then you know what I'm about to tell you isn't punishment. I know. I don't yet know what it is. The translator arrived, climbing onto a wooden crate. You will stand. You will not sit. You will not lie down. This is for your protection. Medical protocol. Follow these instructions and you will be safe. The words landed like stones in still water. Confusion rippled outward. Stand? For how long? Protection from what? They're going to kill us. The translator continued. Food at 1800 hours. You may eat standing. Water available at barrels. Medical checks every 4 hours. Report all symptoms. Numbness, pain, discoloration, dizziness. Margaret's voice cut through. And if we don't stand? Whitmore nodded to the translator. Then you will be made to stand. For your safety and ours. Our safety? Margaret laughed sharply. You bring us to a frozen warehouse, tell us we can't sit, and this is safety. It is, Morrison said in German, not waiting for translation. I understand you don't believe me. You will understand. Pray you understand, before it costs you more than comfort. The door closed with a sound like a coffin lid. 247 women remained standing. Hour 3. Pain arrived gradually, then completely. Legs ached, not sharp yet, just persistent throb. Lower backs protested. Feet sent signals ranging from irritation to actual pain. Women shifted weight foot to foot, trying to relieve pressure without changing position. Clara watched them adapt. Some leaned against walls, some linked arms creating human tripods. Some stood isolated, locked in private calculations of endurance versus rebellion. Annalisa swayed, caught herself, swayed again. Clara moved closer. Lean on me. I'm fine. Lean on me anyway. That's not a suggestion. Annalisa did. Her weight was almost nothing, a child's weight, not an adult's. Ilra adjusted her stance and tried not to think about how long she could maintain this before her own legs gave out. Hour 6. The first woman collapsed. No warning, just folded. Guards arrived within seconds. Not rough, but firm. They lifted her upright, wouldn't let her sink back down. Morrison appeared, checked pulse, temperature, pupils. She was carried to medical tent outside, didn't return. Fear shifted from abstract to concrete. Whatever this protocol was, it was serious enough to remove people who violated it. Hour 8. Rations arrived. Tin cups of soup, potato, barely warm, translucent. Chunk of bread, stale but edible. They ate standing. No one questioned it anymore. Clara found Liesel afterward. This makes no sense. What is this? Protocol, Clara said. Morrison called it medical protocol. How is standing medical? I don't know, but he wasn't lying. I've seen lies. That wasn't a lie. Hour 12. Sergeant Brennan paused during patrol. Clara took a chance. Sergeant, why we stand? He stopped. Orders. Orders to protect us? From what? He turned, looked at her directly. From yourselves. From what you don't know can kill you. He walked away before she could ask what that meant. Hour 16. A woman 20 feet away began swaying violently. Knees buckled. Margaret moved fast, caught her before she hit concrete. Morrison arrived within minutes. How long has she been like this? 10 minutes, maybe more. Morrison checked her pulse, pupils. She's hypothermic, core temp dropping. If she sits now, she might lose her feet by morning. Keep her moving, small steps, circulation. You could take her now, Margaret challenged. I could, and she might lose her feet anyway. If she sits on a heated cot after 16 hours standing on this floor, her legs will stop circulating properly. Blood pools, tissue dies. I've seen it happen. Morrison met her glare. Keep her moving. I'll be back with blankets. When he left, Margaret looked at Clara. Is he telling the truth? Clara processed her training. Cold exposure, prolonged standing, circulation dynamics. Yes, sudden circulation change after prolonged cold can cause tissue damage even while trying to help. So this protocol prevents something worse than exhaustion. I don't know what, but I think we're about to find out. Hour 24. Morrison returned with blankets. As he distributed them, Clara watched his movements. Efficient. Practiced. Someone had done this before. Dr. Morrison, she said when he passed. He paused. Yes? You've seen this before, this exact situation. It wasn't a question. Morrison's face confirmed it anyway. Ward C. 2 weeks ago, 12 men. They sat on this floor. 6 hours later, half couldn't feel their feet. 24 hours later, we were doing amputations. He pulled her aside to the medical tent. Cold outside hit like a physical blow. -4 versus the warehouse's 0. But 5 minutes wouldn't kill her. Inside, Morrison opened a locked cabinet, pulled out a folder. Ward C, December 18th to 24th, 1944. Photos, blackened toes, amputation scars, clinical documentation of human disaster. He spread the documents across a field desk. I'm showing you this because you need to understand exactly what we're preventing. December 18th, 1944. 12 German male POWs arrived at Rhine warehouse. Similar condition to current group, malnourished, exhausted, cold. Placed in same concrete warehouse. Temperature, 2 degrees Celsius. Initial protocol, let them rest. They'd been standing for 2 days during transport. Rest seemed humane. The men sat on concrete floor, used coats as cushions, seemed comfortable. Medics checked after 2 hours, toes still pink, pulse present, no obvious danger. Hour 4. 2 men reported cold feet. Medics checked again. Toes still pink. Advised movement, but didn't enforce it. Hour 6. 5 men reported numbness. Closer examination showed grey discoloration in 3 cases. Men ordered to stand and walk. Too late. Hour 8. Grey discoloration spread. 4 men couldn't feel toes at all. Emergency protocol initiated. Men moved to heated medical tent. Too late. Photos showed what happened next. Toes that turned black overnight, despite rewarming. Tissue that had died during those 8 hours had crossed the threshold where damage became irreversible. Day 3. Amputations. 7 toes removed from 4 men. 1 man required partial foot amputation. Morrison's handwritten notes. Day 5. 2 patients showing gangrene despite amputation and aggressive antibiotics. Possible sepsis. Critical condition. Day 7. Both patients stabilized after extensive debridement. 1 will require prosthetic. The other will have permanent, severe mobility impairment. Morrison tapped the timeline. 6 hours. That's how long it took for irreversible tissue damage in men with similar condition to your women. They didn't complain excessively. They didn't look like they were dying. Medics thought they were being humane by letting exhausted men rest. Your cousin, Clara said. At Anzio, similar? Identical. Sat in cold mud 12 hours. 3 toes amputated. Then infection. Died 3 weeks later. Sepsis. Morrison's voice was steady, practiced. That's why I fight so hard. Why I implement protocols that make me look cruel. I've seen what happens when we choose comfort over medical necessity. I will not watch another group lose limbs because we were too kind to be competent. They returned to the warehouse. Clara understood now. This wasn't punishment. It was prevention, based on documented failure. Every hour standing was an hour of tissue remaining viable. Hour 36. Clara began moving through the warehouse, cluster by cluster, woman by woman. The explanation was simple. Cold floor plus sitting equals tissue death. Standing plus movement equals survival. Platforms coming. Days, not weeks. Understanding rippled through. The standing stopped being pure suffering and became calculated survival. Purpose made endurance possible. Hour 48. Sergeant Brennan returned, stood near Clara's section. He seemed to struggle with something internal, then pulled a photo from his pocket. Army portrait. Young man, maybe 24, strong features, confident smile. My brother, Brennan said. Tommy, May 1944, before Normandy. Second photo, hospital. Same young man, transformed, thinner, paler, bandaged foot elevated. June 1944, 10 days after the landing. He sat in a foxhole with cold water around his ankles. 8 hours. German snipers had them pinned. Anyone who moved got shot. When relief came, he couldn't stand. Couldn't feel his feet. Brennan's hands clenched around the photos. Medics said walk it off. They didn't understand that 8 hours in cold water had already done damage walking couldn't fix. June 10th, toes were black. June 15th, amputation, 3 toes. July 18th, infection spread to bone. They took more. July 28th, his voice cracked, recovered. My mother sent telegram. Tommy died. Not from amputation, from sepsis that started in that foxhole. He was 24. He died because he sat in cold water and nobody understood what that would do. Brennan put photos away carefully. This protocol, the standing, the refusal to let anyone sit on cold surfaces, it comes from Tommy, from lessons learned too late to save him. I enforce this exactly as written because the alternative is more people dying like Tommy died. Clara looked at him, saw the guilt, the weight of failed protection. You think you should have been there instead of him? Different sector, different beach. If I'd been with him, maybe you'd have died too. Maybe as a weapon we use against ourselves. She touched her locket. I wasn't with my children when they were separated. But maybe changes nothing except how much we suffer for things we couldn't control. Something shifted in Brennan's expression. Not relief. Guilt, this deep, didn't dissolve, but perhaps easing of isolation. Thank you for understanding this protocol isn't cruelty. It's memory. It's Tommy and Morrison's cousin and 12 Ward C men all teaching us how to prevent the next death. He returned to patrol. Clara stood still. The protocol was built on ghosts. Every rule was a grave marker. Every enforcement prevented another name being added to the casualty list. Hour 50. Morrison approached. I'm recommending to Captain Whitmore that you be designated medical liaison. Direct communication with me. You can report problems before they become emergencies. Means I become collaborator in their eyes. Means you become the person who keeps them alive. You decide which matters more. Margaret appeared. Take it. Not because it makes you special, because it makes you useful. Useful people keep the rest of us alive. Clara accepted. Morrison handed her his notebook and pencil. Document everything. Names, symptoms, severity 1 to 5. Update every 2 hours. If anyone reaches 4 or 5, signal me immediately. He showed her the signal, hand raised, 2 fingers. That night, Morrison conducted his medical check. 17 women showed numbness in extremities. 23 had blue discoloration. 8 showed unstable gait. We're entering the danger window, Morrison said, reviewing Clara's notes. 24 to 48 hours after sustained standing. This is when Ward C showed critical symptoms. He marked several entries. These 8 need every 2-hour monitoring. If they deteriorate, we evacuate to field hospital regardless of weather. Captain Whitmore made an announcement during hour 54. Supply convoy delayed. Weather in Ardennes. New ETA. 8 days from intake, possibly 9. Disappointment rippled through the warehouse. However, Whitmore continued, we've secured authorization to redistribute supplies from nearby Allied depots. More blankets arrive tomorrow, more socks, additional heating elements, everything except platforms. Those are fabricated specifically and can't be rushed. The 12 Ward C men, someone called from the back. How long did they sit? 6 hours, 8 for some. And we've been standing for 54. Yes. So we're already doing better than they did. Whitmore's face showed something. Respect, maybe. Yes. You're proving the protocol works when people understand why they're following it. Hour 50 became hour 51. The warehouse stood together, platforms still days away. But now they knew why they stood, and knowing why made the impossible merely unbearable. Hour 63. Clara made systematic rounds with Morrison's notebook. Can you feel your toes? Show me your hands. Walk 3 steps. The pattern was concerning. 17 women with numbness, up from 8. 23 with discoloration, intensifying. 8 with balance problems, worsening. She handed Morrison the notebook during his check. He scanned it, jaw tightening slightly. 17 with numbness. We're solidly in the danger window now. These 8, he tapped names, need escalated monitoring. Every 2 hours instead of 4. If their condition deteriorates, they get evacuated. Weather's clearing, Clara noted. Good. Makes transport viable. Morrison looked at her. How are you holding? Clara flexed her hands. Blue tinge around nails. Same symptoms I'm reporting, but functional. Keep documenting. I need to know the moment anyone's condition changes. Not when it becomes critical, when it changes. Hour 70. The storm arrived. Not gradually. Wind hit the warehouse with structural force. Boarded windows rattled. Temperature dropped from 0 to -5 in 30 minutes. Clara felt it instantly. Her extremities, already compromised, lost sensation entirely. Around her, 235 women experienced similar progression. The fragile equilibrium shattered. Morrison appeared within minutes. We're evacuating priority cases, now. Transport already here. Storm window. Maybe 4 hours before roads become impassable. How many? 12. Your watch list plus 4 who've deteriorated in the last hour. He handed her a list. Annalise was on it. Low body weight, compromised circulation. 3 elderly women. 4 with advanced numbness. 3 whose nutritional state made hypothermia inevitable. They worked quickly, helping women into extra coats Morrison had requisitioned from somewhere. Annalise approached Clara. I don't want to go. Your body weight is 87 pounds. Temperature is -5 and dropping. You'll be hypothermic within hours. Clara wrapped an extra blanket around her. Going means survival. Staying means you become a crisis that distracts resources from 223 women who remain. Will I see you again? Yes, when we transfer to proper facility in approximately 5 days. You'll be there already, recovered, waiting. The 12 women were loaded into heated trucks within 45 minutes. Morrison accompanied them. You're in charge of medical monitoring until I return, he told Clara, handing her his full medical kit. Captain Whitmore has my protocols. Sergeant Brennan has emergency supplies. Document everything. If anyone deteriorates to critical, Whitmore has authority to evacuate additional cases. How long will you be gone? 4 hours minimum. 8 maximum. Depends on roads. Morrison's face was grim. If I'm not back by hour 78, assume I'm stuck and you're managing alone until weather clears. Morrison left. The warehouse felt larger suddenly. 223 instead of 235. Hour 74. Temperature stabilized at -4. Whitmore increased patrols, monitoring structural integrity. Guards distributed additional blankets from emergency reserves. Margaret found Clara. We need morale. Whitmore should explain exactly what's happening with the convoy. People endure better when they understand the complete picture. Clara agreed. Found Whitmore during his inspection. He assembled everyone. Supply convoy status, he said without preamble. Currently stopped 60 miles north. Storm made roads impassable. 18 inches of snow in 6 hours. He paused. Storm prediction. 36 hours total. After it passes, plows clear priority routes, military supply, medical transport, emergency services. POW convoys are third priority. 60 miles will take approximately 48 hours to clear and traverse. 84 hours total, Margaret said, doing the math. 3.5 more days. Yes, best estimate. Could be faster if weather shifts, could be slower if roads are worse. And if we can't make it? Then we evacuate. We have 4-wheel drive vehicles that can navigate snow. Dangerous, but if choice is dangerous transport or certain hypothermia, we choose transport. We can evacuate all of you if necessary. The assembly dispersed with new understanding. The timeline was clear. Decision tree explicit. No false hope, but no despair either. Hour 78. Morrison returned. Snow-covered, exhausted but present. All 12 evacuees stable, he reported. Annalise already improving, temperature normalized, circulation returning. She'll keep all her toes and fingers. The news spread rapidly. Evacuation worked. Morrison conducted comprehensive checks. 17 advanced numbness, 23 severe discoloration, 0 critical. We're managing, barely. If temperature stays at -4, we can sustain this for 84 hours. If it drops further, we'll need more evacuations. Hour 80, Margaret found Clara. Problem, Liesel, southeast corner. Her feet, grey-blue, can't feel them, won't report it. They found Liesel leaning desperately against the wall, face pale, sweating despite cold. Clara knelt. Liesel, show me your feet. I'm fine. You're not. You're showing signs of advanced hypothermia or severe frostbite. I need to see now. If you report it, they'll take me away. The woman who collapsed is alive, being treated. You'll survive the same way if you let me see what's wrong. Slowly, Liesel extended her foot. Morrison removed boot and sock. The foot emerged grey-blue from toes to mid-arch, waxy skin. Stage 2 frostbite, possibly progressing to stage 3 in toes. He pressed the sole. Feel this? No response. This? Midfoot. Maybe. Tingling. This? Ankle. Yes, hurts. Morrison sat back. You're being evacuated to field hospital. Now. You hid symptoms approximately 16 hours. Tissue damage is reversible if we act immediately. In 4 hours, you'll lose toes. In 8, possibly the foot. Liesel's face crumpled. Morrison called for Brennan. Transport, field hospital, critical frostbite, 20 minutes. Will I walk again? Liesel asked, voice small. Yes, you'll walk normally. You'll keep all your toes if we act fast. But you need to stop fighting and start trusting that I'm trying to save your feet. Liesel was evacuated 23 minutes later. Heated truck. Morrison's notes in sealed folder. Clara found the cluster near where Liesel had been. She waited too long to report symptoms. Waiting turned manageable frostbite into medical emergency. Report everything. Numbness, discoloration, any change from baseline. One by one, they began confessing hidden symptoms. Numbness they'd been concealing. Discoloration they'd been hiding. Balance problems they'd been managing through willpower. Clara documented everything. When Morrison reviewed her updated notebook, his face showed concern. This changes our calculus. We have more critical cases than I thought. Hour 86. News changed the timeline. Storm weakening, moving northeast faster than predicted. New duration, 24 hours instead of 36. The timeline compressed by 12 hours. Road clearance starts sooner. Convoy moves sooner. Platform ETA, 60 hours instead of 84. 60 hours. 2.5 days instead of 3.5. Mathematics of hope. Hour 96. Dawn brought clear sky. Storm completely passed. Temperature returned to 2 degrees. Road clearing begun, Whitmore announced. Supply convoy will move tomorrow morning. Travel time with cleared roads, 8 hours. Platform arrival, approximately 50 hours from now. 50 hours, just over 2 days. Hour 112. Dawn of day 5. Women counting down. 40 hours to platforms. 38. 36. Numbers became mantra. Morrison. Supply convoy moving. Current location, 40 miles north. Travel speed, 5 miles per hour. 8 hours to arrival. Platform ETA. Hour 124. Hour 124. 8 hours away. Single digits. Survivable. Hour 120. News from Brennan. Convoy visible from North Watchtower, 2 miles out. Arrival in 30 minutes. 30 minutes became 20, became 10. The warehouse held its breath. 5 days, 120 hours. They had stood longer than seemed possible, and now, finally, they could sit. Hour 124. The trucks arrived. Guards unloaded wood planks, 2x4s, plywood. Simple materials that would raise bodies 20 centimeters off concrete. The difference between sitting safely and sitting dangerously. Construction took 40 minutes. 15 benches. enough for 45 women at a time. Morrison stood on Whitmore's crate. Transition protocol begins now. Medical priority first, then elderly, then by condition, weakest to strongest. Sitting periods, 15 minutes initially. We're monitoring for vasovagal response, circulation issues, any complications from position change after 124 hours standing. This is dangerous. Your bodies don't remember how to sit properly. Follow instructions exactly. The first group, 15 weakest cases, approached benches with visible trepidation. 124 hours standing had made sitting feel foreign, dangerous. They sat slowly, carefully, lowering themselves like placing weight on frozen lake ice. Nothing catastrophic happened. They sat on wood that felt impossibly comfortable despite being hard and unsanded. Not relaxed, muscles had forgotten relaxation, but sat. The transformation on their faces was immediate. Not relief, confirmation, proof that protocol had worked, that 124 hours standing had been necessary and sufficient and was now, finally, ending.
15 minutes later, Morrison called time.
They stood. The next group approached. The cycle continued through the hours. Hour 136, Clara's turn came. Medical liaison and strongest cases going last as she'd insisted. She approached the bench, lowered herself, felt wood against her legs for the first time in nearly 6 days. The sensation was indescribable, not comfort, proof of survival, physical evidence they'd made it through conditions that should have broken them. She sat 15 minutes, then stood. Returned to work because medical monitoring didn't stop just because platforms had arrived. Hour 144. All 223 women had completed first sitting cycle. Morrison's checks showed no adverse reactions, no fainting, no circulation failures, no complications. Protocol transition was succeeding. Over the next 48 hours, they gradually increased sitting duration. 30 minutes, 45, 1 hour. By hour 192, day 8, women could sit 2 hours with only brief standing breaks. By hour 216, day 9, they transitioned to normal seated rest with regular movement requirements. Standing protocol, complete. 0 amputations among the 223 who remained. 0 deaths. 24 total evacuations for medical treatment. Hour 228, Captain Whitmore's announcement. Transfer to Mannheim facility scheduled for tomorrow morning. Heated barracks, proper beds, full Geneva Convention protocols. This warehouse will be decommissioned. You'll never have to stand like this again. The words landed quietly. No celebration, too exhausted for that. Just acknowledgement that one impossible thing had ended. Hour 240, transfer morning, heated trucks, 20-mile journey to Mannheim, arrival at a facility that felt like paradise after 9 days in concrete warehouse, heated barracks, real beds with mattresses, blankets, proper bathrooms, hot food, comprehensive medical care.
Clara was processed, documented, given clean clothes, assigned a bed, told that Red Cross representatives would help locate family members.
3 days later, 14 days after capture, word came. Hannah and Fritz had been found, safe, 30 miles east in civilian displacement camp. Reunion would be arranged within the week. The week passed in recovery. Her body slowly remembered how to exist without constant crisis. Feet regained sensation, hands lost blue discoloration. Weight increased from 98 to 104 pounds. March 12, 1945. Clara stood at the entrance to civilian displacement camp. 2 small figures running toward her. Hannah, 8 years old, taller than she'd been 17 days ago. Fritz, 5, thinner but eyes bright. They crashed into her. She knelt, still careful of recovering legs, and held them both. Felt their warmth, their reality.
Proof that standing 124 hours had been worth it, because it meant she could kneel here now and hold her children.
"Where were you?" Hannah asked. "I was standing," Clara said, "for a long time, but I'm here now." The war continued 2 more months. Germany surrendered May 1945. Clara and children remained in displacement camps through summer, then returned to Munich in September, home damaged but repairable. Clara returned to nursing. Munich Hospital, 32 years as head nurse, trained 180 nurses, kept Morrison's notebook in her desk drawer, never forgot the warehouse, never forgot that enemies had saved her life through methods that felt like torture. 1946. Letters written. Clara wrote to Brennan family in Minnesota. The letter preserved at Minnesota Historical Society. Dear Mrs. Brennan, your son Thaddeus spoke of Tommy. I am deeply sorry for your loss. Thaddeus saved many lives here, including mine. Tommy's death was not meaningless. It taught Thaddeus what cold and time can do to human tissue. That knowledge kept 223 women from losing their feet. Tommy's memory lives in the toes of women who walk today because Thaddeus remembered his brother and refused to let history repeat. Your son honored Tommy's sacrifice by transforming personal tragedy into professional protocol. Respectfully, Clara Hoffman, Munich. 1952. Letter received. Dr. Morrison had become director of a VA hospital. His protocols, refined from Rhine warehouse experience, had been adopted across military medical systems. He wrote, Dear Clara, your documentation was essential to our understanding of sustained standing protocols under extreme cold conditions. That notebook you kept has become teaching material. Future military doctors study it at medical schools. The Rhine warehouse case is now referenced in textbooks on emergency medicine and frostbite prevention. Your standing mattered not just for your survival, but for the knowledge that would save countless others in future conflicts. The Korean War has already seen applications of protocols we developed together. Thank you for your professionalism under impossible circumstances. Dr. Silas Morrison. The 24 evacuees. All recovered fully. 12 evacuated during the storm returned to Mannheim facility within a week, reuniting with the main group. 12 evacuated earlier, including Annalisa and Liesel, required extended hospital care, but transferred to Mannheim within 2 weeks. Annalisa Weber. The youngest evacuee gained 15 pounds during recovery at Field Hospital. When she rejoined the group at Mannheim, Clara barely recognized her. The gaunt 19-year-old had transformed into a young woman whose body remembered how to store fat, fight infection, generate warmth. You saved me, Annalisa said during their reunion. Morrison's protocol saved you, Clara corrected. I just made you follow it when you didn't want to. Annalise married an American soldier in 1947, settled in Minnesota, became friends with Brennan family, a connection formed through shared trauma transformed into healing. She lived until 2001, age 76, having walked every day of those 54 extra years on feet that almost weren't there. Liesel Müller recovered fully at Field Hospital, all 10 toes intact, returned to Mainz, summer 1945, resumed work in municipal records. 1947, she wrote to Clara, I hid my symptoms because I was afraid of what reporting them would mean. You forced me to report them because you were competent enough to know that fear kills faster than cold. The difference between those two choices, my fear and your competence, was my feet. I walk today because you refused to let me be foolish when foolishness felt like self-preservation. Thank you for being harsh when kindness would have been dangerous. Thank you for understanding that sometimes saving people requires forcing them to do things they don't want to do. Liesel worked until 1982, retired with full mobility, visited Rhine Warehouse Museum in 1990 with her grandchildren, stood before the wooden benches, said simply, "Those saved my life when I was too scared to save myself. Sometimes the people who seem cruel are the ones keeping you alive." She died in 1995, age 73, having walked every day of those extra 50 years. Margaret Adler never ran competitively again. The standing had damaged something permanent in her legs, some structural integrity that training couldn't restore. But she became Olympic track coach in the 1960s, taught resilience through her story, showed young athletes that strength isn't just about never breaking, it's about breaking and continuing anyway.
Her diary, donated to Rhine Museum in 2001 after her death at age 81, contained a final entry dated December 1950. I think about the warehouse sometimes. Not often. Memory is a burden I choose not to carry daily. But sometimes. And when I do, I think about what Clara said during one of those endless hours. Suffering with understanding is endurable. Suffering without understanding is just torture. That's the lesson that stayed with me through 50 years of teaching young people about resilience. Context matters. Explanation matters. Understanding why you suffer doesn't eliminate the pain. Pain is pain, and hours of standing hurt whether you understand the reason or not. But it transforms suffering from meaningless into purposeful. Dr. Morrison's protocol worked, not because it was gentle, it wasn't, or because it was kind, it wasn't, but because Clara explained it to us, because Sergeant Brennan shared his brother Tommy's story, because Captain Whitmore was honest about supply delays, because we understood that standing was prevention, not punishment, because we knew we were following a protocol written in the blood of 12 men who'd lost toes, so we wouldn't have to. We didn't survive through heroism. We survived through professionals executing protocols based on documented failures. We survived because ghosts, Tommy Brennan, Morrison's cousin, 12 Ward C men, taught living people how to prevent the next tragedy. I spent 50 years teaching young athletes about pushing through pain, about finding strength when strength seems impossible. But the real lesson I learned in that warehouse wasn't about strength at all. It was about trust, about accepting help from unexpected sources, about enemies who chose to be professionals rather than ideologues, about the thin line between cruelty and competence.
If you're reading this in the future, and someone must be if this diary survived, remember, the line between help and harm is thinner than you think. Sometimes the people saving your life are the people you'd never expect. Sometimes mercy looks like cruelty when you don't have complete information. Sometimes the hardest choice isn't between good and evil, but between two painful paths to the same destination: survival. Pay attention, ask questions, understand context, because mercy without communication is indistinguishable from cruelty, and we barely distinguish the difference in time to survive. 1989. Rhine Warehouse became museum, small, regional, not famous, but preserved. The wooden benches were still there, weathered, marked with names carved during those 9 days. Morrison's medical protocols displayed in glass cases. Clara's notebook opened to her final entry. Margaret's diary in a separate exhibit. 1995. Clara's visit. Ilra visited the museum once at age 85. Walked with a cane, not from war injury, just from age. Stood in the warehouse that had been her world for 9 days, 50 years earlier. It seemed smaller than she remembered, less vast, just a concrete building, nothing special. But she stood in the center and felt all of it return. The cold, the exhaustion, the impossible choice between standing and sitting, the slow understanding that enemies could be professional, that protocols could be mercy, that survival wasn't heroic, it was just following instructions from people who knew more about frostbite than you did. A young museum guide approached. "Did you know someone who was here?" "I was here." The guide's eyes widened. "You're one of the—" "Yes." "What was it like?" Clara thought about how to answer, settled on truth. "It was cold. It was painful. It was necessary. It taught me that the world is more complicated than we want it to be, that enemies can save your life, that mercy can feel like cruelty when you don't have context, that standing for 5 days is possible when the alternative is losing your feet." Was it worth it? Clara touched the locket she still wore. Different photos now, grandchildren added to Hannah and Fritz. "Yes, because I walked out of here. All of us walked out. That's worth any amount of standing." 1998. Clara died. Age 88. Her obituary mentioned 32 years as head nurse, 180 nurses trained, contributions to medical education.
It didn't mention Rhine warehouse. That story was too complicated for obituaries, too nuanced for simple narratives about wartime suffering. But at her funeral, an old man attended, American, traveled from Pennsylvania, Dr. Silas Morrison, age 88, same as Clara. He placed a photograph on her casket, black and white, warehouse interior, wooden benches visible. Written on the back in Morrison's handwriting, "The woman who saw patients when I saw protocols."
The nurse who understood that saving lives sometimes requires asking the impossible.
The professional who transformed enemy into colleague through shared commitment to medicine. Rest well, Nurse Hoffman. The feet you saved still walk. 2024. Museum received final donation. Margaret's diary. Private for 57 years. Now public record. The three documents, Clara's notebook, Margaret's diary, Morrison's protocols, sit together in climate-controlled cases. Three perspectives on the same 9 days. Three voices saying the same truth from different angles. The story. In a concrete warehouse on the Rhine in December 1944, 247 German women stood for 124 hours, because sitting on frozen concrete for 6 hours would have cost them their feet. 24 were evacuated for medical treatment during the crisis. All recovered. 223 remained standing until platforms arrived. 0 amputations. 0 deaths. They survived because American soldiers remembered their own dead and refused to create more casualties. Because Dr. Morrison's cousin died at Anzio from trench foot complications. Because Sergeant Brennan's brother Tommy died at Normandy from infections that started in a cold foxhole. Because 12 men in Ward C lost toes 2 weeks earlier, teaching doctors what not to do. They survived because enemies chose professional competence over ideological hatred. Because medical standards transcended nationality. Because protocols written in blood prevented the next tragedy. It wasn't heroic. It wasn't inspiring in simple ways. It was disaster management executed by exhausted people making impossible choices with limited resources. It was mercy that looked like cruelty until context emerged. It was standing when sitting would have felt so much better and would have cost toes, feet, lives. Clara Hoffman stood 124 hours. Not because she was strong, though she was. Not because she was heroic, though she could have been. But because she understood that standing was prevention. Because Morrison showed her Ward C photographs and she believed him. Because Brennan shared Tommy's story and she recognized grief as teacher. Because understanding transformed impossible into merely unbearable. She stood because not standing meant losing her feet. She walked away because enemies explained their cruelty until it became recognizable as mercy. And for 50 years afterward, she walked on feet that almost weren't there, carried children who might have grown up motherless, trained nurses who would never know that their instructor once stood for 5 days straight to prove that professional standards matter more than nationality. The warehouse still stands. The benches remain. Every year, a few hundred people visit to learn about the standing protocol, about frostbite prevention, about disaster management. About the time, 247 German women survived because American soldiers remembered their dead and refused to repeat mistakes. It's not famous, too complicated for headlines, too nuanced for simple narratives about good and evil, heroes and villains, us and them. But it's true. Every word of it is true. They won't let us sit, Clara had said on day 1. They won't let us lose our feet either, she understood by day 5. And in the space between those two truths, in the gap between what looked like cruelty and what was actually competence, between what felt like punishment and what was prevention, between enemy and professional, between standing and surviving, lay everything worth knowing about how mercy works when everything else has failed.